Yeah, I'm really pleased to be here tonight. As Monica mentioned, I'm replacing Denise Amio, the president of Colleges and Institutes Canada, and also chair of the ISSP Advisory Council. So I will try to bring a little bit of something that's of interest to this really interesting and diverse discussion. We've had a lot of ideas already about all the ways that knowledge can and should be created and shared and used to support a flourishing, sustainable global society during this period of rapid technological change. And because I'm coming from the post-secondary sector, and in particular the college sector, I thought I'd tackle the questions tonight from that perspective, and thinking particularly, and I think it picks up well on the last discussion, how we equip people to live in a global knowledge society, and more importantly, hopefully to flourish in it and to contribute to it in some way. There's been lots of public discussion in our corner of the policy world over the past several years about the impact that advances in technology are having on the workplace, on individual jobs, on the skills to be that are required to be successful in the workplace over a lifetime. We're talking a lot more about lifelong learning and continuous learning, and the need to continue that process over a life course. We've got even bigger questions about what work is going to be, what work is becoming, and who's doing that work. What work is left to robots? What work are the human beings still required to do? And the capacity of a critical mass of those human beings to actually be able to respond to the type of work or the skills that are required in order to do that work. I don't know how many of you are on Stephen Tobin's mailing list. He's the, I think, executive director of the Labour Market Information Council, and they're looking at some of these questions about supply and demand in the labour market and getting better information to employers and to students and to educational institutions. And they've done a really nice annotated bibliography of all of the various studies that have been, or not all of them, they've made a subset of the future of work studies. They've chosen 45 so far. Most of them have been published in Canada, most of them just in the past 5 years, and that's a select set. So if you want a nice little summary of that. But a lot of these studies are suggesting that the education system needs to do more to respond to these changes that are taking place in the labor market. And we're hearing the same things from employers. CFIB came out with a report not very long ago. The Chamber of Commerce has been fairly vocal about this. The Business Council is engaging in a new way with the Higher Education, Business Higher Education Council, that employers are not satisfied with the skills that they're seeing in the graduates that are coming out of their programs, that we're not preparing them for the world of work. Right now, the current popular solution to that problem is work-integrated learning, or post-secondary programs that involve some sort of co-op opportunity or work placement. And I'm a big advocate of that. I'm paid that to do that in my day job, but it's not a complete solution, because as important as employment is, there is life beyond work. And I think the life beyond work part is maybe what we're talking about tonight. So many of these concerns, the prevalence of social media, the decline of traditional journalism, need for science literacy, civic engagement, all point to the need for each individual member of society to possess some set of basic skills and to be able to continue to develop those skills over their lifetime in response to this rapid change that we're seeing. So how can educational institutions, and I'm just talking about them only, answer this call to action? How would we know that we're doing the right things, and how can our progress be measured? And what frameworks, what are we starting with? What frameworks and assessment tools already exist that we can use to point the way? So several years ago, the Canadian government adopted a skills framework that consists of 9 so-called essential skills that are described at, I think, a total of 5 levels in the case of most skills. I'm sure some of you are quite familiar with those. They're reading, writing, document use, numeracy, computer use and digital skills, thinking, oral communication, working with others, and continuous learning. These correspond pretty closely to what is being called in all of those reports and by the various employer industry associations as human skills, soft skills, innovation skills, workplace skills. They also sound like a pretty good starting point for this sort of broader set of maybe global knowledge skills, or what individuals need in order to survive in the world that exists today. The Canadian initiative has mapped those skills to several hundred different job profiles. There's a whole tool set that you can use, including tests that individuals can take online to different levels to see where they score and assess whether or not they're ready to take on a certain job. I'm happy to report that even though I'm an English major and a public admin major, I took the level 3 numeracy test and passed 100%. So woohoo! The European Union has done similar work on this and more recent work, because they're always ahead of us. And they've identified 8 key competencies to make teaching and learning into a lifelong learning enterprise. And they sound, I think, even better aligned with the types of skills that we're talking about here in terms of global skills. They include communicating in a mother tongue, communicating in a foreign tongue, which I thought was very interesting, mathematical, scientific, and technological competence. And when we talk about science literacy, I think that's something that is missing, at least from the words in the Canadian model. Digital competence, learning to learn, social and civic competencies, sense of initiative and entrepreneurship, and cultural awareness and expression. So I don't know a lot about how those are being implemented in the European Union. That's a complicated world, and all of the various governments are taking those on board or advised to take those on board as they're looking at their teaching and learning systems. But I think what's also interesting, and again, I'm sure there's good awareness here, is that the subset of both those skills corresponds quite closely to the test that the OECD has done in 2012. 23 different countries participated in a program for international assessment of adult competencies, or Piak. That assesses literacy, numeracy, and problem solving in technology-rich environments. So an interesting baseline if you sort of accept the premise that those basic skills are representative of something that's going to equip us to survive the coming challenges. And something to look at, not only comparison across countries, which is interesting but probably really not too relevant. Looking at across the jurisdictions in Canada, you can see different provincial levels, and it looks at adults from ages 16 up to 65, so you get quite a cross-cutting profile of the population at any given time. But I think what's more interesting and maybe more useful, and maybe points to some of the areas that are concerning, is that you can see gaps in demographics, in people with different levels of education, different socioeconomic circumstances, and I think that's where you talk about people being left behind, or some of the unrest and some of the things that give rise to the autocratic regimes that have been referenced is often attributed to people who perhaps don't have the voice that each individual should have in a democratic society. What's also interesting, and I wish I couldn't find the report that I saw, probably it was just a news article, but that they're looking at robots and artificial intelligence and assessing their abilities on the same levels that the Piak is testing. And in many areas, robots are at level 2 and pushing rapidly towards level 3. So this isn't about getting an entire population up to an acceptable level and then we'll be good. I think maybe the definition of the levels, or people have to keep stretching as technology keeps coming in and changing what it is that we do and what we're best at versus what is not going to be needed to be done in the future. The Piak does quite a broad range of other data collected there, and in general, and not surprisingly, those higher skill levels are associated with better health and social outcomes over a life course, higher levels of political and civic engagement, and very generally, higher levels of education attainment are also associated with higher skill levels, although this isn't 100% true, which is also something that I think the education system needs to consider carefully. I'm suggesting that it would be interesting to look at those frameworks. There are likely others, but those are two certainly prominent ones, and think about them in terms of global skills. Is there something there that we can build on? Is it something that we should be looking at in the same way that we're looking at the future of work, but actually the future of life and the future of participation in a global society?